which like any director, that's basically the goal is to bring people into the mind of the people who's doing the film, I think. In my case, it was a weird trip, if you will, because the film is not, it's out of this world, you know, it's not something on the day-to-day basis, it's more of a dream. So we had to, you know, really make things because these are abstract things, and we had to make these things as clear as possible so that, you know, the team would understand it, the actors would understand it, and eventually people looking at the film would understand it. So I dealt with many talented people to bring these images to life. The first person involved who was really key was François Skeiten, who's a very well-known Belgian comic book artist, childhood heroes of mine, and he's been doing reinventing cities into the future for the past 25 years with this series, this Obscure, and I really dig this stuff. You know, I really like his comic books, and people were telling me, you know, okay, this is the way you want to approach the film, and I said, no, I don't want to mimic the style. I want to have this guy involved. And people would tell me, you're crazy. You don't have the budget to hire a guy like that. And I said, he's alive. He's, you know, the worst thing that can happen is that he will say no. And he said yes. And the guy had done, the two films he had done before were The Golden Compass and, you know, Mr. Nobody, which are big budget movie. And ours was tiny budget, but he didn't do that for the money. He did it to try stuff, you know, as a laboratory and experiment stuff. So it was a very nice collaboration. It lengthed for almost 5 years, and we drew the whole film together and imagined the whole world together. It was very fun to work with him. And after that, the other person who's key with the visual was Benoît Beaulieu, the cinematographer, the guy behind the camera. He was key also with the production. He's both one of the producers and the cinematographer. We shot the film with the red camera. It was one of the first Canadian films, if not the first one, to be shot with this technology. For obvious reason, it was cheaper, but also it looked good. And we used very old lenses from the 60s, so that it would give it something, you know, dirty to the image that we liked. And we used lens flares, and, you know, the more dirty it was, the better looking it was for us. And after that, the third person who was essential was Carlos Monzon. He's a guy he was working for ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. He had worked on Star Wars, he had worked on Star Trek, he had worked on Avatar. He was a very talented lead compositor, and I wanted this guy because I knew he was from Quebec, and I knew he was talented, and I brought him on the show, and he looked at the whole thing on green screen, and he made the magic happen. So these three people are responsible for the image.
Any other questions? We just have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
With the instruments, where did the idea for the instruments come from?
I'll just be very quick because I'd like one question for Caroline at least. The instruments, that was very tricky because I knew these were the very rare props I would need for real, because the whole thing is CGI generated. I mean, the whole scenery is fake. But the only props that I needed were the musical instruments, and I didn't have the money to pay for that. So I figured that if I could have somebody else to pay for it, that'd be nice. And I thought, since these sculptures will be nice, perhaps they would interest somebody. And I went to Guy Laliberté, the CEO of Cirque du Soleil, because he's an art buyer, and he would be interested, in my mind, he would be interested by something like that. So I went to him and sold the thing before they were even made. And he bought the sculptures before they were made. And the sculptor worked for a year on these sculptures, and they were beautiful, and Cirque du Soleil still have them, and they borrowed the sculptures for the film. So I was happy because I would get them for free, and the sculptor was happy because he worked for a year, and Guy Laliberté is happy because he has the sculptures now.
Caroline, would you tell a bit about your character, your experience?
Well, I guess hearing you speak, there's one thing that I want to say. I don't know if there are any directors in the room or any cinematographers. There's one thing that I really admire about this man is that when a problem arises, he doesn't, well, it's an obstacle, but he goes beyond that, and he uses the problem to make it part of what he couldn't have even imagined to do. Like the hologram that you see, the floating head, was a problem that happened because the actor that he wanted was not available. He's a very prolific artist. I think his schedule, his agenda is always planned like 2 or 3 years ahead. But he really wanted to work with him, so he said, well, let's have his head floating on his body and shoot him in 2 days with 9 cameras in a room around him, and it'll be fun. And then he did it. And then he's in our movie, and it's, I think, one of the greatest ideas of the movie, is that character's floating head, you know, and all that it brings to his ideas and the technology and how ahead of his time he is and how disconnected he is from his body and his heart at the same time and not, which is interesting. But yeah, so I would say to everyone out there, when there's a problem or an obstacle, sometimes it's a beautiful mistake, and just make it, I guess that goes for life in general, but anyway. Just dare to make it something that you didn't even envision, because our minds are so square sometimes. There you go. Thank you very much.